What we have seen is now become a meta phenomena. The whole concept of distributed workforce, which till about 100 days ago was still a futuristic thing, is today increasingly becoming a reality. And it's not just about working from home, flexi working, or remote working, it's far more than that. Similarly, the role technology is playing in evolving the socio emotional thinking of people across the globe is very, very interesting. Not only large multinational corporations are seeing those changes, even small and medium enterprises, enterprises that work in non metro or non cosmopolitan areas, are also seeing those interesting developments. Today, I am having a very interesting conversation with Dr. Brian Kropp. Dr. Brian Kropp is the head of research for Gartner's human resources practice globally. Welcome, Dr. Kropp.
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you inviting me.
It's interesting, and I've been having conversations with a whole lot of peers across the globe on this whole subject of future of work. We've done this interesting research where we found that a whole new generation of people has evolved as an outcome of this interesting phenomena. I would say we'll not even call it a challenge or a crisis anymore. What we call as Generation R, and you've seen that some of the outcomes. Now, from your perspective, what are some of the 2-3 permanent changes that you think are going to come? How will the workplace change? How will the workers change?
Yeah, what's really interesting is, to your point, about 100 days ago, we thought we were going to go and work from home for many of us for 2 weeks and then go back to the workplace and everything was going to be back to normal from that perspective. And what we're finding is that we're not just in a period where we're working from home because of the pandemic. We're in a period that work itself is fundamentally changing. And at some point, there'll be a vaccine. At some point, there'll be more effective treatments and all those sorts of things. But the changes we're experiencing now will actually be fundamental changes, and we won't rebound back to where we were before. So some of the things that we think will be fundamentally different. One, when you look at the number of people who were working remote before the pandemic hit, out of all the jobs that could be done remote, only about 30% of people worked remote at least some of the time. Once we're back to that next equilibrium, we're going to be close to 50% of people working from home some of the time. And what that actually means is not that we're going to have a remote workforce or an in-office workforce, but we're going to have a hybrid workforce where some of our people are working remote some of the time. And some of your direct reports will be working remote, maybe your manager will be working remote, and this constant back and forth. So the idea that there's a stable place where we work won't be true. It'll all be a hybrid environment, sometimes remote, sometimes not. Some of the people on the team in the meeting, some in person, some in the meeting virtually, and so on. So this very hybrid experience. So that's one major shift, just where people will work and the flexibility that's created with that. The second one that is really underappreciated, though, is that what is being created is an environment where when people work will change just as much as where people will work, for a couple of reasons. The first, what we're finding with remote work and kind of the situation right now, people's days are being extended earlier and later. And as they're dealing with childcare, all these other things that are going on, people's days are being chunked up into pieces more. So when you actually look at the data of when people are working, it's at different time slots. The second thing, as we try to get people back to the workplace, what we're going to find is that we can't get everybody back at the same time and socially distance. That's just physically impossible to accomplish. So what companies are really exploring is this idea: could we start work earlier in the day? Could we have it go later in the day? Could we have people work on weekends but not during the week? But trying to move the variable of time around to create more flexibility around when people work. And then the third factor, there's a lot of other research that is showing that for knowledge-intensive work, brain-intensive work, that once you get past 25, maybe 30, 35 hours per week, the productivity of employees actually drops really quickly with that type of work. And in the future, there'll be more of that work and less task-oriented work. So you put all those factors together, we're entering a period where the idea of like an 8:30 to 5:30 day might not be the future either. So people are going to be in a different place where they work, They're going to be working at different times from that perspective. And that leads us to what is the workplace going to be like and how's that going to be different? One of the, there's kind of two things here that I think are really interesting. One is with fewer people in the workplace at any given time, you need a smaller workplace. You don't need as much real estate. And what some companies are doing is really trying to use that money to, or use that opportunity to decrease the size of their real estate to save money. But other companies are saying, well, actually, we want to give our real estate and workplace a different job. The purpose of our real estate is to create more culture. It's to create collaboration areas or innovation zones, or a way to engage our customers, or a way to engage our communities, but really rethinking the whole purpose of our workplaces. And it's no longer the place where I'll go and sit and type away at keyboards at the same time. And then the other place that's going to be really different is, and this is a trend that's been occurring, which is just being accelerated because of COVID-19. The amount of data that we're going to collect about our employees has been increasing steadily for the last 5-6 years. It will exponentially increase across the next several for a couple of reasons. One, with all these employees working remote, about 25% of companies have bought new software to track the productivity of their remote employees. And two, as we're trying to manage the return to workplace, a lot of companies are collecting all new types of health data about our employees. So temperature checks, about 45% of companies want to track their employees' COVID-19 test results to see if they have the antibodies or if they're positive or negative, all those sorts of things. So we're going to see an even quantification and even a greater investment in analytics when it comes to managing our workforce. In fact, 2020, these non-traditional listening tools, so scraping your email, where you're going and those sorts of things, they'll use more of those things to assess employee engagement levels than they will the traditional large-scale employee engagement survey. This is the year where that is switching over. In the future, that's how we're going to learn about our employees, and that's a fundamental change in what the workplace is going to look like going forward.
Yeah, it's very interesting. In fact, as you talk about knowledge workers seeing a decrease in productivity beyond 30-40 hours a week, that's a very interesting paradigm. And I think it will have a permanent bearing on how the roles are designed, the employee expectations are designed, and even the kind of freedom that we give to the people. You know, earlier, and you and I were talking, and you mentioned that now is going to be the time when outcome will be more important than process, right? Mm-hmm. Individuals need to be more responsible and more morally and value-driven individuals. I think that's going to be important, because remember, there is no policing happening now. Everybody is on its own. And I think the same applies to the businesses also. In our research, we have found, and in multiple conversations with the leaders also I've seen, and I remember our earlier conversation where you also alluded to the fact that organizations are now really waking up to living the values with the right intention than before. Why do you think suddenly this living the values or having value-driven business has become so critical for organizations?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. One of the things that's really interesting as you think about this is how technology is impacting work in a lot of ways. So, if you roll the clock back 100 years ago, a lot of what was done as work was just tasks, working on an assembly line, doing the same activity again and again. And through a series of generations of technology changes, from industrial revolution to computer revolution, now the AI revolution, and so on, that those tasks have steadily been replaced by machines. And kind of the AI revolution that's occurring right now is that some of the brain work that we've had in the past is being replaced by machines from that perspective. And so when you put all of that together, what you find is that companies have to come up with smarter, newer, innovative ways to attract and retain the best quality talent. And what they're finding is that people want to work for an organization that they believe in and that they value. And in fact, one of the things that's really interesting that differentiates millennials, the generation that is in the workplace now, the next generation that's there, versus previous generations in the workplace, is a really important distinction about them. What previous generations would have said is that this is the company I work for, and if that company happens to do good or bad things, then the company happens to do good or bad things, but has no reflection on me. And now the generation that has entered the workplace, and the next generation, has a different. What they say is, this is the company I happen to work for, and if that company does good or bad things, that reflects on me personally, and my friends and family have a different perception of me if I work for a company that is doing good things or bad things. And so there's that big generational shift that's there, which I think is really interesting.
And I think you and I have spent decades in understanding employee engagement and employee behavior at workplace. And this is a very classic case where the disassociation that we saw between the employee and the workplace is now kind of getting evaporated. And workplace for me is not just a place to go and earn money, but it is essentially a fundamental framework of defining who I am and who I am being, right?
Yeah.
So as more and more individuals are getting so associated at the workplace, how do you think the organizations need to evolve their culture and their business practices to be able to retain and also to be able to cater to the needs of these people who are so emotionally attached now, I would say?
Yeah, it's this emotional attachment that I'm looking for, but there's another part of that, which is the social attachment that they're looking for. And where people now, they might have friends across a variety of different places, but the social connections that you develop through work are increasingly important. And that's one of the characteristics about the culture that's really going to define organizations, and the experience that's going to define organizations. And by the way, as employees are working remote, that is one of the biggest risks associated with them quitting as they work remote more often. As we've been looking at what causes remote employees to stay or not stay, the biggest factor that we find in when they've quit is a feeling of isolation and lack of social connections with their coworkers. So really thinking about how do you build those social connections makes all the difference in the world from that perspective. So that's one big place where I think the culture is going to have to change and have to evolve that work. And I think that's different as well. In the past, we really wouldn't be comfortable sharing who we are, what our real interests are, and building those deeper connections. And through COVID-19 and everything that's happened, we realized that's just important. A funny story for you about where some of that blurriness is occurring. There's a company that we work with, it's a French company, and one of the things that they did to try to build social connections is they actually created their own company radio station that you could listen to while you're at work.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so you could pick songs for it to play, and then everybody could listen to it. And then what you could also do is make dedications to other employees that helped you out on a project. So it's a way where you could give public recognition to everybody to say, hey, this person helped me on this project, it was great, etc. But really interesting and innovative ways where companies are trying to build those social connections as part of their culture to create a deeper workforce.
And this is very interesting because when you say creating social connections, man is a social animal, as we say. While we are all locked inside our house and we are not able to socialize in the normal ways, we are constantly finding newer and better ways of socializing. I just love this example of a radio station, and I'm sure people who are watching this would get inspired and look at things like that. Technology certainly is playing an important role. Workplace is transforming. Now, whether technology is a cause of it or effect of it, it's kind of, again, a redundant question. But from where you are, Brian, what would be your advice to business leaders, most importantly, the HR leaders, as they are trying to define what their next, cultural framework would be, and how would they transform to be so-called future ready for the next gig?
Yeah, it's funny. we talked to a lot of different HR executives about their technology purchases and kind of what they're thinking about, what they're trying to build. A lot of it comes down to using technology to improve the employee experience from a lot of perspectives and making that happen. And when we've talked with them and we asked them why they're making these purchases, making these decisions, one of the wrong answers that we hear from companies is, well, we've heard other people are buying those things, so we feel like we should to keep up with them. And what we found is that when you're making these decisions to change the experience, buy new technology, new benefits, new services, whatever it might be for them, just to keep up, you're just in this constant struggle where you have to throw more and more money just to tread water from that experience perspective. So there's two things that you really should think about differently when you're looking at these different workplace technology decisions, the investments you're making. The first one is, what sort of experience are you trying to create? And is this going to be a differentiator for you or not? Because a lot of companies are just buying things, using things, implementing things without a real purpose of what are we trying to create? And if you can't define what you're trying to create, then you don't have any sort of criteria to think about what you should be buying or what you should be using. That's kind of the first part. The second part is you really have to shape the experience and heavily communicate the experience to employees about what's going on and what they're using and the benefits they're getting, the value that they're getting out of it. We are living in a world where it is so short term that we forget what happened yesterday or what was good yesterday, and we're always thinking to that next thing. What we're finding is that companies and HR executives are really partnering with their communications teams and their marketing teams to help craft stories about the experience and the technology you use and the benefits that you get and the services that you're getting as an employee. And really by shaping that and letting them know what problems they solve for them, how they can use them, why it's a good thing, and really thinking about a communication strategy around this is a really important way to help make sure that employees are getting the value out of the technology investments you're making, the decisions you're making. Because otherwise you're just in a technology arms race with your talent competitors, and that's not going to end up in a good spot. But if you're thoughtful about what you're trying to do and really craft the story around it from an employee experience perspective, then you're just much more likely to get a more engaged workforce that's going to be higher performing and more likely to stay.
Yeah, and I think the point that you raise, why people buy technology, that's a very interesting thing. In fact, at Oracle, we have found that there is a journey that an organization needs to undertake as they begin to upgrade their HR from a very rudimentary compliance-based system to the highest level of technology adoption, where empathy, compassion, and those kind of very softer elements of the culture can be impacted by technology. And I think we will leave that conversation for some other time. But this has been a great conversation, Brian. Any parting thoughts that you have for our viewers before we close this?
You know, this is it's an amazingly interesting time as a researcher to kind of see what's going on and live through history as we're seeing it. One of the things that I'm struck by is that COVID-19 is a humanitarian crisis, and we are in human resources. And this is a moment where we have the ability to really shape and redefine the future of our organizations. And for the HR executives that do this well, they will be the leaders of the organization going forward. And they will truly be the ones that have the best impact, not only on the performance and success of their companies, but the performance and success of the communities that their companies operate in. And in many ways, that's just as important as achieving their organization's success in terms of the legacy that these HR executives that do a good job here will leave.
Indeed, I think this is the crisis where HR is at the driving seat of the transformation, and we are playing a far greater role. I really loved your statement that this is a humanitarian crisis, and as human resource professionals, we are kind of holding more than our fair share of responsibility here.
Absolutely.
Okay, Brian, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you. Let's stay connected and keep on doing this, because as the world is evolving every 100 days or so, I'm sure our mutual research will throw up a whole lot of new things, and we could share so much more together.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a good day and stay safe.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.